The silly cat had pulled off the cone of shame and bitten off her stitches in the middle of the night. She looked so pleased with herself, but now we had to be the bad guys again and take her back to the vet. I mean, my husband had to be the bad guy again and take her back to the vet. He put her in the carrier and got in the car. When he got back, the cat now had staples in her side. The cat was lucky as the vet had used surgical glue on the wound before he put the stitches in, so thankfully it hadn't reopened when the cat had bitten them off. Unfortunately, this meant the cone of shame clock had to be restarted. The cat had another 10 days to wait before the cone could come off. The vet had suggested we buy a cat harness to tie onto the cone as another way to stop her pulling it off at night, but the shop's smallest harness was still too big for her. She had already put her front foot through the neck hole trying to get it off. This was obviously not going to work. I went back to the shops and got a cat collar. This would be a lot more comfortable than the harness, so hopefully she'd keep it on. When we woke up the next morning, we took the blanket off the cage, and the cone was still around her neck. Phew! Thank goodness for that. We could now continue on with the 10-day cycle. For the next 3 days, the cat stayed in the cage. She was asleep most of the time. The poor thing must have been bored out of her brain, but it was essential that she get her rest. We did try to give her something to look at. We had placed a cage next to the window so she could at least see the outside world. We have fairy wrens that nest in our backyard, and since the cat was caged, they'd been a lot more daring and inquisitive, even coming right up to the patio door to catch the bugs. I think they were having the time of their lives. On the 4th day, we closed all of the bedroom doors and we finally let the cat out of the cage. We kept the cone on to see how she'd react, but also to ensure that we could easily catch her if she ran off. She was quite cautious and stayed close to the cage. It was obvious she wasn't ready to explore the rest of the house yet, though she did check the doors to see if she could escape. Overall, she did really well. She seemed quite happy to stretch her legs. I think having the kitten there for moral support helped her greatly. The kitten had been loose in the house the last 3 days and was happily running around without a care in the world. Whereas for her, this inside world was very strange. It had new smells and was quite different to her old life outside. Our routine now was to let her out of the cage a few times a day, and as she got more settled, we let her out without the cone on. It was hard for her to have it on as she kept bumping into everything, especially the chair legs. She also hobbled around quite a bit. We realized that our stone tiles were too hard on her leg stump, much harder than the grass or dirt outside, so I decided to get her a sock. At first it started off as a joke. They were so cute and tiny. We thought she'd bite it off as soon as we put it on, but she didn't. She must have realized that it was easier to walk around in, as she kept it on even when we put her back in the cage. When it was time for bed, we took it off again so it wouldn't bother her during the night. As the days went on, the cat got more confident. She was relaxed enough that she started playing with the kitten and was happy to do it right in front of us. It was really nice to see. They would wrestle and chase each other around the treehouse. They also liked to play with us. When the kitten got tired, he'd curl up in the treehouse for a nap. It was then that we'd put the cat back inside the cage and she'd fall asleep herself. Eventually the 10 days were up and it was time to remove the staples. Thankfully it was a fairly quick visit and the cat was back home in no time. When I got home from work, I saw that my husband had already dismantled the cage and moved it out of the house. He said the cat was still quite scared of him and had run away every time he approached her. In fact, since they'd been home, she'd spent most of her free time hiding behind the couch. The kitten was also a little wary. We think it was because the cage was no longer in the room, and it had always been a big part of his life. It was almost like the cage was his security blanket. It was a big change, but we were sure once they'd spent some quality time together and got used to the new routine, they'd be okay. At bedtime, we put them both into the girls' bathroom so they could spend the night together. We knew they were much happier with this sleeping arrangement, as we didn't hear one meow from them all night.